And we're back with another Black and Cream podcast. This is another bonus episode from season 2. Shout out to Adobe for making this one happen. I hope that you guys are liking the bonus structure. It's kind of cool for me because eventually I'll do season 3. But right now I'm traveling a lot for work and, living life and doing all these things that I've been doing. So being able to record these sparingly has been really cool. And I'm really appreciative of Adobe for being a part of all of these so far and helping me set these up. And I've been able to talk to some pretty insane creatives. And today is no different. I get to talk to Ami Vitale. She is a world-renowned, award-winning photographer. I'm not even going to summarize her career. She has been doing it at the highest level for so long, taking some of the most important images for humanity. And that's what we talk about: humanity, empathy, creative upbringing, and how to carve your own path in this really intense world that we're living in. And she's just, I love the conversation we had. Clearly I'm sick right now. Something's going on. My voice is shot. But anyways, let's just get to it. A huge thanks to Adobe for setting this one up. This is so cool. I get to work with Adobe. Like, what? It's crazy. If you're watching this or you're listening to it and you find that this resonates with you, hit me up, shoot me a message, let me know that you heard it. I appreciate everyone that's listening. And let's just get into the episode.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. You walking back in with a coffee is how we'll start this podcast.
Essential.
Yes. We have our coffee. Right. We're ready to talk.
Awesome. Hello.
Amy, you're on the podcast. This is a virtual one because I'm on the road and you're basically about to be on the road soon. So yes. Thank you for giving me your time today. I appreciate. I know. Yes. Cheers. There we go. The little clink. I was like, it's black with no cream for a reason. I don't know if you everyone else always gets weird about it. They're like, I use cream though, and I'm like, it's all good. I'm joking. I'm like, I'm just fueled by this caffeine every day. That's the only way I'm going to get through it. So
it's really perfect. It's so nice to finally meet you.
I know you too. Your office looks very inviting and homey.
Oh. Yes. It's a little. My friends are teasing me because I color coded.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Why are you doing that? Like, wouldn't you do it by subject?"
Funny. I love it. No, it looks awesome. I'm in a hotel room, so it's not that fun. But my first thing I wanted to talk to you about, because your career is insane, first off, and you're talented as hell. It's ridiculous. So I'm excited to talk to you. I want to know, how do you archive everything? Where is everything at? Where do you have, I can't imagine.
I literally wanted to move everything around. I'm in the middle of that right now. Yes, that is such a good question. I actually am in the middle of doing a huge, changing over systems and putting everything back on a NAS with a backup and moving the backup off-site. And it is, I thought about doing the online archive, but I live in Montana, and two things. I was told it would take 10 years to upload my entire archive.
Oh, my God.
Then I actually researched it, and I was like, I think it's just environmentally to have all of it going online would have a huge impact. So so I've been thinking about all these. It's a real, it's kind of the bane of my existence, and I've lost so much really historical work. Has this happened to you too?
I've definitely been in some drive failure scenarios, or just even forgetting to do a backup, or and you learn the hard way, and then you recorrect yourself. Yeah,
but how about you? How do you do it?
I definitely, I feel like I've just recently got into trying to solve that problem, because I have even my favorite stuff I shot when I was just getting started, or just, as in high school, that stuff. I'm I love looking back at that stuff, and from then all client projects. And so I've been doing a whole server thing and trying to figure out how to have a duplicate that I can keep in my parents' house, and hopefully it can. I don't have it all set up yet, and I am such nowhere near the nerdiness to be able to master it. It's crazy.
True. It is crazy. And the one thing for anybody listening, my bit of advice, so I've always been a journalist, and I learned really early to caption your photos, even if it's super simple, but putting a few key things right away is going to make your life so much better when you flash forward. And images that I thought had no relevance, when sometimes you don't even understand the significance when you're in the middle of a place and photographing. And now when I flash forward, they take on a totally different and very often important meaning. And it's so important to really understand, really the basics, what, the 5 W's, like just get it in there. And the other thing I use is, not just to protect myself or for commercial reasons, but I really like to use this app where I get model releases, and then I have people's phone numbers and addresses, email addresses, so I can keep in touch with them. And that has been this amazing tool that sometimes years later, people will want to use, like, for example, I've been asked a few times to have my work in TV shows or films, and I'm able to get back in touch with the people and even give them extra money that they were not counting on. And so I really like having that connection with people.
What was the app called?
Yeah, Easy Release. And they can just sign
cool.
the app. It takes a picture so you can even identify and be sure. Because in the past, I used to be like, girl in pink dress. And then I'd get home and there'd be like 10 girls in pink dresses.
Right. Yeah. You're like, okay.
That did not work. So, so the apps are really phenomenal.
No, that's really cool. And I think that's what's so important too when it comes to logging, just and having an incredible archive. And I think as time goes on, it's becoming even easier, but then there's so much options to have access to it, where it's like, did I keep that info about that client or that person in my notes, or was that in my email, or you know what I mean? Like, streamlining the process has been so, I know you've done so much work. So it's like, I can't imagine how I interviewed a friend at T-Bo Jefferson on here, and he's a really amazing skate photographer. He's been shot basketball with like Kobe Bryant, and he's just been doing it for so long, and his archive is just like absurd. But like being able to reflect and go back to a time period and know exactly where it is a job in itself. I didn't mean to become so serious about it. I was just making a joke about how you've taken so many photos.
Oh,
and
it
videos.
is. No, but I think everybody has their own systems, but it's super important. You're right. And also, I think this is such a great segue into this conversation about trust and attaching making sure that your images, that that they don't become orphaned, that all the information is embedded in it. And
right.
Especially in this digital age with AI, like these conversations are really important.
No, totally. And we'll get to that first, but I would love to know, so normally I think the people that I've had on the podcast are within my industry, I guess. It's usually docu, film, commercial based, photojournalist. I've only ever had one on. It's so interesting because when I look at your work and I'm just like diving in and hearing TED Talks you've done, and I'm listening to like the stories and how your origin of how you got there, and then the job itself is so fascinating because it's there's so many parallels to like what I do when it's like with documenting artists and finding like the human story. And so yours is drastically more insane because you're like, I'm embarking into hundreds of countries and I'm going in and I'm living in it, or I'm fully engulfing myself. And it's just so inspiring. It's like re-inspired. Like it makes me want to travel more or do more and see more. Yeah. It's like you do the coolest stuff ever. And then you get to come home and relax a little bit, but then you go back right at it. I know that you got a grant and that kind of kicked it off for you, but like what made you curious about the camera first off? I don't know if it was like just cool and then you shot someone and you felt like that was
actually, yeah, no, I mean, the camera is probably what stopped me in the beginning because I don't geek out on the technical stuff as much as other people do. I mean, now I do, but in the beginning, I definitely did not. And it almost, learning, and back in the day, it was just like learning. You'd have to wait and I even learned how to process my film, and you'd make mistakes even in processing it. And so there was so much failure along the way. And, in the beginning, I just thought I'm not the right person for this. I was also like incredibly shy. And I mean, I do talk about this because I actually think a lot of photographers are shy, and we find our voice through this medium. And that is definitely what happened. It was this really beautiful tool for me to get out into the world, which I was very curious about. I mean, I think that is the one thing that connects all of us, is that we do have this insatiable curiosity, and that's beautiful. And the camera was this way, I realized pretty quickly that it took the attention away from myself, and that being an introvert was actually my hidden superpower, because the greatest tool you can have is to be a good listener and give people space to share. And once you do that, like, it's beautiful. And when you make people feel safe and seen and heard and valued, they open up their world to you. And that is like the biggest, like that, it's all about, I mean, life is about our relationships and our connections. And I want to connect. I mean, that is the one thing I realized that I could do with my work is really help people understand things on a local level. And then it grew to, a national level. And then it grew to this global thing that, stories, if you have a universal theme and intimacy, it's like the infinite and the intimate all in one image. There's so much power, more than ever in today's very visual world. You can stop people in their tracks and make them feel again in a very disconnected world. And I love what we get to do. And I think we are doing the same thing. And it is just, that we need more of that.
Yeah, you do a good job at it, because it's like, it just completely resonates when you look at your work, like from video, photo, like just seeing and hearing a story, or the exposure to, and being able to be the mediator to get it to an audience that may not have heard of it. Like, that's the job. And I think it's a really special thing. And but I don't get, like, you're from Montana? Were you born and raised in Montana?
I was born in Florida.
Florida.
Yeah.
So in Florida, if you're born and raised in Florida and growing up in Florida, like, the desire to want to see the world, because I think that's the interesting part too, is when it can click in someone's head that there's more than whatever is in your
That's exactly
bubble.
what happened. You're so intuitive. Yes. I grew up and was like, is this it?
Yeah.
More,
Yeah. Was there anyone that was doing something similar to this, like going out and exploring? Like, what was there an inspiration? Or?
Wow, it definitely. I think pretty early on, it was my sister, who's the exact opposite. She's very adventurous. She was the one. She and my brother too. They both really. She went and joined the Peace Corps, and she lived in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa. And then I think later on really wanted to go and see her, and she, back then there was no way to really communicate. We'd get letters, every 6 months, and I went and visited her once, and then that set me off on this track, because then there was a civil war where she had lived, and we both were really interested in what happened to her family. And so that's kind of how I applied for this first grant. Still very much an amateur, and much to my delight and sheer like, I was terrified, because I was like, God, I'm going back to this place that I don't really know. And I didn't speak the language, and I had 100 rolls of film, English Pular dictionary, and I bought 2 sacks of rice and headed off into the middle of Guinea-Bissau. And it was, this really, I wasn't the kind of, my sister was the one that completely, I channeled my inner Abigail, and that helped me.
What was she doing? Was she a journalist, or what was she doing out there? Like that?
She is a wildlife biologist. She is the most amazing human being, and just really beautiful soul that is very adventurous, and I don't know, I think she was my role model in the beginning. And my mom too. My mom was, yeah.
That's cool. How old were you at the time? Like what?
So the first time, let's see, I think I'll have to think back. So when I went and got the grant, I was still, I think maybe in my early 20s. But no, I think the first time I went, I just have to think back. When I visited her, maybe I was 19, and then I basically applied for the grant and then went back.
That's so cool. I mean, yeah, honestly, it's like we're still so young in that era of like understanding of what's possible or what you know what I mean? And then you got a little bit of exposure and then decided to like roll with some rice. It's like, what in the hell is like, to make that decision is so crazy, you know?
It's
just,
you know what? My sister taught me this, to be comfortable with discomfort.
mm-hmm.
And to trust in the kindness of strangers and your own intuition. And the truth of the matter is like most of the time, if you're really paying attention, you can tell when things are off and get yourself out of it. It's usually when you get yourself into a situation, it's because you haven't been listening to all of the inner like radar that is saying like, boop, get out of here.
Right. But what became the desire then to try to amplify people's stories, or like how did it?
Oh.
And also how did that transition into you got this grant? Which can you explain to people, like, is that typical to like go get a grant to be able to go? Is it to go document, or like what was it for specifically?
So it was the Alexia grant to promote cultural understanding. And I think that is the thing that I've been the most frustrated with, is how afraid we all are of one another on this beautiful planet. And I definitely, kind of go out and try to embrace every situation I'm in. And I realize that if you take the time to really try to connect and understand, we need more storytellers. We need more connector, and more than ever right now. Oh my goodness. Like, people are just so afraid of one another. And if you kind of take the time to step into the shoes of others, like, to me, I think that is the wellspring of creativity, is empathy. And like literally trying to walk in the shoes of others, even though you won't be able to do that, but to try to make the effort to understand. And that takes time. Like, I don't mean just parachuting in. I mean, really taking years to really listen and go deep into one another's stories. It requires a lot of empathy. And that, to me, that's what photography is for me. It's just like the platform I've been able to use to kind of be this connector of people's beautiful stories and even complex stories. Like, it's not just beauty, It's I want to go to the tough, the complex stories where there is tension and and conflict, and I want to understand why, and where is the middle.
Could you give an example of like a conflict that you've covered and then kind of how you've approached it? Because I'm also I like this. It feels educational for the listeners, and a lot of people may have not explored this or would be considering this as an avenue to explore if they're young creative. But there's so much conflict in the world.
There is, and it starts in our own communities, and I really realized that, for example, in Montana, I realized like there are these issues, and if you go and start talking to people, we're very often connected by something really important, like a shared love of this land. And the thing is, very often when you parachute in as the journalist or storytellers, you don't have that depth of understanding to talk about the nuance and the subtleties and the things that connect people. And I noticed pretty early on in my career, I was asked to really show the most violent, sensational pieces of a story because that is exciting. That is what people want to hear, right? Mm-hmm. But I realized pretty early on that all that was doing is polarizing people. And it can be on a local level, on a global level. The same thing happened when I was asked to parachute into, wars. And then that was the moment when I began to push back, and I was like, I'm going to go and live here. For example, I went and lived in Kashmir, which is, where like a flashpoint between India and Pakistan. And I just realized that, oh my gosh, I mean, it's like the longest pending conflict in the world, the most militarized place in the world. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records for those things. And it's going to take a lifetime to be able to tell these stories. And rather than just photographing and emphasizing the conflict, I really wanted to humanize it and understand and get away from the front lines and talk about like the history and the cultures and the people. And I mean, I think you can do that in your backyard. The same things are exactly true.
Yeah, an election just happened. The way people divide and have that separation and have no. I struggle with it too, having lived in LA for almost 10 years, and then going back to Iowa and going back to what Iowa is a lot of assumptions and bubbles and things like that, which is so interesting. And I feel like that's just locally that's like an issue, but then being able to figure out how to communicate or not just pick a side, but also like you saying like going to a war, if you're going there and you're trying to find a way to humanize, but the headlines here are not usually that, right? Like it's not usually focused on the dramatized version of it, which then creates like me going to take a trip to Dubai for a job. And then my family's like, be careful. And I'm like, well, what? You know what I mean? Someone says like,
I feel more afraid here.
Yeah, I'm like, what are you? It was just sketchy walking to 7-Eleven down the street. Like I am okay, I think here. Like, but you know what I mean? I think there's that thing.
Exactly. No, and I love that, and I think that really we're all in our phones now, and I have made such an effort when I'm traveling or on an airplane. Like we need to start talking to each other again, and listening and hearing and just asking questions. But it's I know it's a tumultuous moment in that that we're not hearing each other. Yeah. And I think that is the role. And this is interesting. At the same time, in the backdrop of all of this, there is a breakdown in local journalism. And in some ways, I thought the local journalist knew everybody. They were kind of the fabric and that kind of helped the conversation in communities. And now what you have is just when an issue becomes, a hot, then people from outside your community come in, and very often mistakes are made, or it's just polarized. Yeah. And it leads to more polarization. And so I really believe we need more local journalism. Like that is important.
So when you said that, I saw something, you ended up living in India for maybe 5 years. Mm-hmm. Like when you're talking about trying to build the rapport, or because I also think I think that I would love to hear your side on developing relationships and the trust of a subject. And because it's, as soon as you bring any camera any camera of any sort is going to become invasive to someone's life, especially if Absolutely. They're normally not having that on them. So what's kind of your process? Because do you spend time, sometimes things are quick and you need to get in there fast, but like, how do you expedite a relationship? Obviously I could tell we'd be just friends immediately if we did sit next to each other on a plane, and you're very inviting that way. But what have you learned from all these different?
going slow is the fastest way to get to where you want to be. And it's like, put the camera away, take the time to really build connection and listen. And sometimes it can be fast. Sometimes like putting the camera away for 10 minutes and like then getting to it like, wow, in genuine, authentic care and curiosity it's real, and that opens doors. But I'm in it for the long haul. Like really, a lot of my most important stories I've been working on for over 10 years. I'm not making that up. Like the images that have created the most change and like have become this tool for change and raised, some images have raised millions of dollars for different causes, and they go viral and they cause conversation. But guess what? Those images, literally, one of them took me 9 years to make. And that, when I say that, I mean that it took 9 years of building the trust in a community and sort of being able to see where things were going. Like every story, you can it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out like where things are going. And by figuring out what it is, the story you want to tell, and kind of making connections early on. And then it doesn't mean you have to be there for 9 years. It just means you stay in touch and then wait for the key moments to happen. And that is sort of how I tell my stories. I just keep in touch. Every day I get messages from friends in different places all over, and I'm checking in and they're checking in with me. And, if something important is about to happen, I'm there. But yeah, I think your initial question is, it's about really creating trust. And I think, and also, it's so important to make sure where your images are used later. And so one example, I will not sign contracts with media if I'm working on a very sensitive story, and you really need to read their contracts, and they will often ask, like, we can use this image in perpetuity forever for anything we want. And I'm like, nope, no, you can't. This image, you can come back to me if you want to use it for something else. And and I think it's very important for young photographers to know they need to read contracts. They need to tell, very often you can make compromises. Like, sure, you can use the beautiful landscape or the wildlife images forever. That's fine. But when there's somebody in here who's sharing a really sensitive story, no, you can't. I didn't make that deal with them.
Did you have to learn that was there a scenario that you had to, like, that taught you that lesson?
Oh, always. And I had an example where I didn't even, you also have to use tools to find out where your images are being used. But back in 2014, I woke up. Remember the Boko Haram kidnapped these girls in Nigeria? And somebody made this beautiful campaign called Bring Back Our Girls, because they were frustrated. Their governments weren't doing anything. The girls were, they were being possibly sexually trafficked. Nobody knew what was going on. But I woke up and I saw my pictures with tears added onto the faces of these girls I had photographed in a country thousands of miles away from where this happened, going viral, being used like Chris Brown and the BBC, and I think politicians were like resharing these images with this campaign, hashtag Bring Back Our Girls. And I was like, great campaign. The only problem is these are not the girls who are being, kidnapped. And there's a problem there. And this was back in the day of Twitter, where I could only reach out to the people resharing them in 40 characters or less. And I'm like, how do I summarize that these are not their images and this is not okay? How would you feel if your daughter were being used as the face of this campaign. And while I am so sympathetic and want campaigns to be made, you can't just take any old image off the internet to illustrate this. And so it was interesting to get the responses back from, it went from hostility to, somebody from the BBC saying, well, it's already been shared tens of thousands of times. What does it matter now? And I was like, oh, it matters. And you need
It'll
to
be there
stop.
forever.
Right. And so this was a really important point in my life of anxiety first, but then like, okay, what do you do about it? And this has been really empowering for me because I realized we do have a lot of control over our work. And it is serious work. Like, I mean, I spent 6 months and hired somebody to help me to work to get all of these images off the internet. And the thing I learned is there are these things called DCMA takedown notices, and you basically have to prove you're the copyright holder. So everybody go and copyright your images. But just so you know, you own, when you make an image, you are the copyright holder, but you can actually take an extra step and send them to the Library of Congress. And what that does is just means that if you choose later to take people to court, they are responsible for all of the lawyer fees because it is if you don't do this, it's too expensive for you to really take people to court on your own. So It is a very simple process, and people need to be doing that, number one. You can do it after images have been published, but it's really important to do that. But even if you haven't, you can actually write people, issue these DCMA takedown notices. And then I actually went further and created like a manual of like all the things you need to do. There's these web searches you can do to find out where your images have been used. And
cool.
There's also services, which I use now, that you can send your images. There's somebody called PhotoClaim, and I send my images to them, and then they scour the internet for you, and they find where cases have been used without licensing, without your permission, and they do all the work for you. And that's really important. But in this case, I ended up really launching a campaign to educate people because I was like, hey, we need to get these images. And then somebody else surprised me because I didn't even know this. And they were like, did you know that these images of these girls, not only were they used in this campaign, but they were being used to illustrate, religious websites oh my God, I mean, healthcare, everything. Like people were using my images I didn't even know about it. And so this was this really big wake up call to me that I need to do more. I need to do more to protect, it's not just my images. No, I am in a social contract with the people. I have a responsibility in my work, and it's the same for you. You go and document these celebrities, and they would not want you using these images or other people using these images. So I think a part of it is educating the public. I mean, I realized that some people got really hostile with me, and I realized like, oh, I need to help them understand in a really kind way, like how would you feel if your own daughter or sister, or niece, whoever, her picture was being used to illustrate this really serious thing? My guess is you wouldn't want that.
No, that's insane.
I just try to humanize things and help people understand. And then and that's when I also am super excited because there's this new tool that I'm using right now called it's Adobe's made it, and it's the Content Authenticity app. And basically, it really helps me to gain and protect my ownership of this digital work. And I can attach all this information about myself and even, what I do to an image. So I'm a journalist, so I have strong, ethics around what I can do to an image. And I don't, I want people to believe in the story. It's super important. So I don't do a lot of manipulation, and I want that attribution attached to these images. And I think trust, to me, is the most important thing that I can have in an increasingly, disconnected digital world. Trust is everything. And so this app is really allowing creators to put all of these things, embed it into these images. And then the last thing is AI, but we can get to that later.
I mean, this is so good because it's you don't realize. I mean, what's crazy is the world's so big, right? So like we think there's like these tiny stories that we should highlight and all these things, and you don't realize how things just flow to the ether, and it's just out. Things are out there, and
totally.
it's crazy to think like, if someone put you on the milk bottle or whatever without your permission, and then that same person's like, well, whatever, it's fine, and definitely it's helping the good cause, but photoshopping tears onto someone's eyes and then using them as the poster child for something versus finding the people who are really kidnapped and using them as, or that's like what the story is. But it's so, it's so crazy. It's so crazy to think. And then all the work you're doing to figure out how to fight it is a challenge in itself. But I think that that's what's cool. And especially the thing with Adobe, because they told me about it too. And I think what's cool about this is like, especially because a lot of times even in the music side, like people will work with an artist or they'll work with a brand, and then those artists will use their content for whatever. And I see so many young creatives that will get into like going shooting a music festival or whatever, and they just want the artist to like share their work, and then they do, and they don't tag them or they don't credit them, or there's no financial gain or any of that stuff. And that is such a currency in itself, identity to who did the thing, where I think that this layer, as there's so much everything else you just exposed me to with all these tools of being able to headhunt and find.
There's tools, and also it's up to us to be knowledgeable about what our, power is. And you brought up a really interesting point. I had the BBC wanted to share my panda pictures, and I was like, cool, yeah, for Panda Day, absolutely. Then they sent this contract, and it said, we have the ownership, the right forever to use this picture for the whole company, for advertising, for everything. Basically, they wanted me to give up my rights. And I was like, that's not cool. That's not about Panda Day, sharing the panda love. And then I thought about it, and I wrote them back and was like, you guys, that maybe think about changing that contract, because there's a lot of young people out there that might be really excited for one opportunity, but not realize that they're giving up their rights forever. And I think that there's so much education, not just with the creators, but also the consumers, the people looking at images. Like, we all need to be more educated and start to understand how to figure out, the visual literacy, and where images are coming from, and especially with AI, because we need images help us understand the world we live in. And if nobody trusts anything that they're seeing anymore, this is a really terrifying moment. I think there have to be authentic storytellers in the world that we trust. We desperately need these tools to authenticate this trust and know, when, people are doing something for a commercial reason. And then I had another really interesting experience. I gave a talk at a conference, and I was the final speaker, and all the speakers before me chose to use AI images to illustrate their stories. And afterwards, and I was telling these like beautiful and heart-wrenching stories. And afterwards, this young man came up to me and he said, "That was amazing. But I have to tell you, for the first 15 minutes, I thought all of your images also had to be AI. And I didn't believe anything you were saying. I was trying to understand what point you were trying to make." And then he's like, only after 45 minutes did it really, did it all sink in that this is all real. And that, and that really struck me, because I just thought we're entering this dangerous, new landscape where visual literacy is so important. And as the creators, we actually have a responsibility to educate people and talk about what is real. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing an advertisement, that's fine, but talk about that too. And, I think, and when you're making AI images, I don't know if you've been on Instagram lately, but there's all these crazy AI generated videos, with people rescuing a huge octopus and cleaning the octopus. And I don't know if
I thought it was real. I literally saw the whale and they were cleaning. I was like, oh my God. I sent it to my wife and she's like, that's AI. I was like, no, I don't think. I literally debated with her. I was like, I don't think so. It looks so real. And I'm like, oh, I thought that was cool. And then I'm like, does this not happen in real life? I'm like, I don't know. Exactly. How horrifying is it?
Right. And that's just one sort of cute story. But when you put that in the context of really issues that impact our democracies, our understanding, conflict, if we want to live in a safe world, a safe, secure world, it really requires, trust, and we are the messengers. And so, I think we have a whole lot of issues that are coming a million miles an hour at us, and all of us need to start. I've been using this. I think building these tools into our workflow are really important. Registering your images with the Library of Congress. You need to do that. You need to attach your, credentials, and whatever app you use. I really am loving the Adobe, this content authenticity app, because I just batch load things in and I really just build everything into my workflow now. And I think you need to add these steps. And it may not feel important to you. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just a beginner. I'm just, dabbling in photography. And I'm like, nope. You have no idea where, what image you may make that might have some importance to it. And I think we're all documentarians. Mm-hmm. And everything. And I think it's going to get even easier, because I think the camera companies are now working together, for example, with Adobe, to have it already in the cameras.
Well, I didn't know it was such an initiative. Sorry to cut you off. I didn't realize it was a full initiative, because I saw that this was rolling out, and then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, because now it's when I first started, it was this ugly watermark that said benhaggerty.com on every photo, blue and yellow and disgusting font, and just the worst thing I could have ever slapped on every photo. And I still see them on old Facebook. People will pop up on a tag, and I'm like, God, that was hideous. But then you eventually want to get rid of that, because you can just let the photo speak for itself. But then you take yourself off of it, and if anyone reshares it, and then when they were talking about this a step in that direction of finding protection or verifying you, I think that's what's cool. And I think that's what's going to be interesting about how all these companies allow it. Can I someday go to Instagram and be able to truly see instead of saying this person's verified on Instagram, or any of these platforms everyone just pays for, it's knowing that you can go and see that this has been verified through a content credential, and being like, oh, cool, I can just see that this person did this shot in this time frame. This is their links to their social, who they are, what it is. And I bet that's going to hold journalism, all these platforms like accountable for this, because they're all eventually we'll all have to put those tags on. Anything else is just the fake stuff that's out there that's being manipulated to look like a story or a spinoff. That's the one thing I hate, is how often anyone will be like, hey, I heard that this is happening. And I'm like, heard from who? Oh, TikTok. And I was like, what about it? They're like, oh, they just said that, the world's ending next week. And so that sucks. And you know what I mean? Some stuff like that. I
do know what you mean. I feel like this is also part of our responsibility to really understand where we're getting our information and how to judge whether it's authentic or not. And, we, as the creators of this content, have a huge responsibility. The other thing, just in a creative perspective, like I work so hard to make images that are beautiful and do the work. And I don't do post-processing to do all of these extreme things. I have, I talked about that. And I love this app because you can actually scroll back and kind of see the beginning, what the image was, and then what like the manipulation created. And I think it allows you to really see like real art. There's a photographer named Nick Brandt that does these his work is so, it's iconic and powerful, and he creates these unbelievable, they literally are unbelievable. Like, look at the Day May Break series, and he did this whole series underwater, and it's really illustrating environmental issues and the biodiversity loss, but he does it in such a beautiful, intelligent way. But he always gets so frustrated. He's like, people say I I manipulated my images. And he's like, these were all shot in camera. Nothing has been created. There is zero, adding things. And I think that's really important to the craft and for people to understand that, because it really says a lot about who you are really as a creator too.
No, I love that. I was curious, you said, because I know we're on there's so many tips right now just for people that are listening to this. I was curious, you said you spent 9 years for the one image that you were talking about that ended up making such a massive impact. What was that image, and what how did you start finding the story and getting to that point?
It's kind of the story that changed my life. So back into, I had been covering the war and the horrors of the world for about a decade. And I had this really moment when I was feeling really raw and knew I needed to take a break. And so it was in that moment that I began to realize, in the backdrop of all of these stories I had been covering was always the natural world, and that a breakdown in our environment, everything is connected to our resources, that leads to human conflict. Almost every example, if, whether it's biodiversity loss, extinction, climate change and loss of, clean water, or, being able to grow food, all these things are connected to human suffering, and eventually, it does lead to more conflict. And I just thought, God, I'm telling the end of these stories. It is about our resources, and we need to start taking care of this magnificent world we've inherited, right? And that, the other thing is just realizing that our connection to wildlife, we think we don't need these creatures. We do. It eventually, we know we're going through the sixth mass extinction. We've lost 73% of the world's wildlife in the last 50 years. And if that doesn't make people, stop for a second, I don't know what will. But it's I just realized, God, I gotta kind of include this in my storytelling. And so I heard about this species of rhinoceros called the northern white rhino, and that they were moving 4 of them from the snowy Czech Republic, from a zoo there, to Kenya, in this last-ditch effort to save the whole species, because at that moment there were only 8 of them known to be alive. They were all living in zoos. And I mean, when I first saw them and we're just face to face with these like big, gentle, hulking, like prehistoric creatures, you just, in their presence, you just realize like, oh my God, they've been on this planet way longer than, they look like dinosaurs. You know, I literally felt like I was staring at a unicorn, and I was like, God, this is insane that there are only 8 of them alive. And so I started that story back in 2009. And by the way, you know, nobody wanted the story because they were like, it's not going to be visual. They're moving them in crates. And that is one other thing to photographers, like, trust your instincts. Nobody knows what you are seeing or, you know, the story you're going to tell. Like, just keep going for it if you think you have something interesting. And so it's funny because it's become the most important story of my life. And I knew that, you know, I mean, I hope that the open air and the room to roam might somehow help them breed again. But tragically, it didn't work. And so, you know, back, and then 9 years later, I got the call. I stayed in touch with Old Pejeta Conservancy, and I got the call that the last male northern white rhino, named Sudan, I mean, he became quite a celebrity. Tinder called him the most eligible bachelor. And like, he kind of was a star. And so I was there in this heartbreaking moment, and it still makes me emotional. But like, it was just this devastating moment. And I think what was so surprising, I took, you know, 2 images of this moment when one of his keepers, Joseph Wachira, leaned in to say goodbye. And then Sudan leaned his head into Joseph's. And I mean, it was just, everybody was sobbing. It was awful. And it was so quiet too. And I just, that image and that moment is seared into, you know, people, like, around, it went viral. It went around the world, and it, you know, it also had tremendous impact, and it still does. I mean, it raised, during the pandemic, when the sanctuary was struggling because tourism stopped, there were no tourism dollars coming in. And that one image, like, raised millions of dollars, not just for the sanctuary to keep all these people employed, to keep protecting and working with these, you know, not just the rhinos, but all these other species. But like, it's just, I realized like that was a defining moment for me. I used to tell human stories, but it was like, oh, wow, like, images have power, and we can really affect positive change. And that was like this moment when I was like, I'm in it for, you know, I'm in this. I need to do more. I need to also like try to support other young journalists that want to do authentic, grassroots kind of storytelling. It matters. And, you know, it takes time to create those timeless images. You know, they don't happen overnight, but it's powerful, and there is currency in what we do. And that's like why I love this job.
Thank you. I have a few questions, because that image is absolutely, yeah, it's just heartbreaking. Like, it's like, and I don't know if it's just I'm in my era of being very vulnerable now or whatever. Like, when I'm driving the other day and I saw like a rabbit that was hit in our neighborhood, and I was like, damn it, because like we have rabbits that come up and hang out and eat from our bird feeder, and I just like want to cry, you know what I mean? And then I'm on the flight studying you, and I'm seeing this picture, and I'm like, and then I click and I'm watching the videos, and you're just like, holy shit, this didn't get to live, that we couldn't figure, like, we're making electronic cars and we're doing us. People can vape now or whatever the hell seems to be important to people, but we can't keep rhinos alive. Like, how is this happening? And being there in that moment, I mean, I'm curious from the technical side, like you get the call because they clearly know that you need to document this, right? But at the time, like how you talk about like when putting the camera down, is it, you said you only took 2 images during that moment? Like, is it just being there and when the time is right, like gently just grabbing the photo, or how did you actually approach in that moment? Because I think it's a great example for someone.
Yes, it is about, I mean, okay, so now there's mirrorless cameras, so I make many more pictures than I did in the past because I put it on silent mode.
Yeah.
But the sound of the shutter, it was so silent that day. I mean, all you could hear was this muffled sobs, and it was raining, and I did not want that metallic sound of the shutter, you know, that I just wanted to be respectful, you know, like when people are grieving in their most private moment, yes, to me, like, and I knew like how many, and it was funny because National Geographic later was like, do you have a vertical? We want to put it on the cover. And I was like, sorry, no, I didn't think to do that. I just made my 2 images and then grieved with everybody. And then, you know, really looked for the moments that I knew mattered. And it is this balance always when people allow me in, you know, actually they weren't sure they wanted me, even though they called me and I flew there and they were like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have you document this. And I was like, oh, come on, you guys know me. Let me document it. And if it's really bad, like, we won't use it. And that's the kind of trust that it takes, right? It takes years. And that's why I say, like, that one image took 9 years of relationship building. And, you know, a lot of my stories do. I think that's, you know, I think today it's not about traveling to the farthest reaches and, you know, like being Shackleton. It's really about how you tell a story and how you find something that hasn't been told already, or wait for this unique moment. And they're all around us. Like unique stories are everywhere, but we need to, you know, be more creative and not just do the same things that have been done before us.
Well, and I think it takes so much courage too, because you understand what this is for the people that are there, that the caretakers of this animal and the community of that animal. And so in that scenario, and I deal with this too, and so the artists I work with, and trying to find times like when to let people just have their moment to themselves. And even in my personal life, it's like you just want to, like, there's so much stuff I just need to, you know, like my mom's first time getting chemo, like I have a recording of just the sound of the machine, do you know what I mean, just pumping stuff into her body. And it's like that's important for me to just have. And so I think like being able to not let, to know your strengths and know your talents and know that you can be quick with it and that you can be minimalistic in it and that you're not invasive. But then there's some people that don't understand that yet. So they may not be aware to how shooting a moment like that, you know, and they're just walking around getting a million angles and doing all these things. It's like finding the talent is in you, and that's so specifically to you and your character, which I'm applauding you for, but also just saying like it takes a lot of learned training to know.
Exactly. If anybody's going to take one thing away, this is so important. And I'm curious, I have to ask you, when do you think you learned that? Were you always that way? Because being a human being, I think sometimes people, it's like they're on a safari and they don't know when to stop. Was that something intuitive in you? How did you learn that?
Yeah, for me, that's the hardest part, because I think a lot of the times when you're brought in and this is the thing, right? Your thing is to document. It's like you are supposed to point that camera and you're supposed to make sure that moment's captured. And then there's certain times where it's like, sometimes you got to put it down and help, or sometimes you got to hold someone's hand, or sometimes, you know, like, yeah, there's been some insane scenarios that have happened in the past, that like a friend, someone passed away when we were all together, but we're filming something, and it's part of the story, and then, you know, and you got to figure out when, and it's like apologizing sometimes afterwards, but also like knowing that you're able to do that moment because you've built the trust of that person so much, and they love and care for you, to know that you love and care for them as well, that who knows what this is for, but it's better to just let me do it and we hug afterwards, or get a moment and hug. It's a very weird position to be in. It's very, it can feel so awkward. You can feel so horrible. You can feel so whatever those feelings are. But at the end of the day, I can imagine after 1 hour or 5 hours or 2 days later, everyone having that image of that moment means the world to them. And I think that that's what I've realized and I've learned about my skill set, is that I can give someone something that they really like. You know, everyone can grab the photos or whatever, you know, with their phones, they have the little whatever. It's just something that you can take with you as like a prized possession and a memory of something that you love so much. And I think that photo, I can imagine, especially for that caretaker, hugging him and like, holy shit, it makes you want to cry. It makes you feel like so pissed off that the world is just turning into this, that there's piles of garbage sitting outside my hotel here in LA, and like people just don't care about anything anymore.
They do. Yeah, that's not true.
They do. I was gonna say, you feel like that's it. So a lot of people just are like, who cares? No one. But that's not the case. Like there's so many people making massive adjustments to that.
You brought up so many beautiful points that I just want to point out. I think as a photographer, it is this balance, right? Like you need to be empathetic and really figure out when you put the camera down. But I was also, in the beginning, the other extreme where I was too sensitive and I was never making images in like these sensitive moments. And that was a push for me. So I do think like there is this, you know, spectrum, and you need to kind of intellectually like figure out when you need to be there, making that work, and that, you know, and letting people know that you care, and then also knowing when to shut it off, you know, and some people don't. And that's when they alienate everybody and make them feel exploited. And it is this real double-edged sword. Photography and storytelling it's super powerful. You can really amplify all these beautiful voices and stories, but you can also, at the same time, if you go too far, do the exact opposite. Make people, you know, historically understanding the roots of things, like so many people around the world and cultures have been exploited with photography, and like knowing all of that stuff is really important. And then you also brought up this other point, and I think like powerful images are not one thing or the other. They are not too saccharine sweet and just beautiful. Like it can't be that, only that. Like you can have that, but it's so important to have a story and a message and the tension and the grief, and like you need to have a mix of those things for powerful storytelling images. For me, and people do care. Like that is the amazing thing. I also think I love that you cried when yes, like we're starting to understand the intelligence of all these beautiful creatures we share this world with, and that we have so much to learn from animals, actually. Yes. I mean, we are animals, so.
Yeah, no, it's true. Just to say as an example of a story, you have those images, and then you talk about how it raised millions of dollars. So how did you navigate knowing that what you had was proof of extinction on Earth and a massive issue, but also a story about love and relationships? How did you decide how to use that then could generate, like, did you think like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to help this sanctuary and help these people? Or what was the process after that?
I mean, I think, this is another really interesting question, because, I am a journalist, and it is this really gray line, like, are you an advocate or are you a journalist? And then, there are just some truths that are so obvious that it's like, Yes, I am a journalist, but when I can get out and speak about what is happening and what I have witnessed and why, making those connections, again, between the infinite and the intimate, that's where we need to live our lives. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And it actually, I've been very uncomfortable. I was not into it. I'm really still, I don't enjoy attention. And so I literally have to recharge even after this talk. You're lovely. And I like the connection, but I always get embarrassed, and it's just who I am. But I realize, like, I have a responsibility in a way now to talk about what I've seen and let people decide. And that happened during the pandemic, and I almost hung up because I was so terrified to be on this call with all these people I didn't know, and I did it. I just I told the story, and afterwards hung up, and my somebody called me back and said, by the way, somebody was on that call, and it was a major donor, and they to this day are still supporting this sanctuary. And like, you just never know who's in the audience. You never know who's listening. And I think that, it's always just important to take the attention away from yourself and remember it's not about you. Like, you're just telling stories and sharing what people have opened up their lives and allowed you in. And I think it is then, in a way, our responsibility to not just like put the picture and the story in your archive and forget about it. Like, now you got to get out there. When you've been given access to something so, special, then it's really important. We have a job to do now. And that was interesting. Like, I actually wrote the publication days before it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen, and they didn't want to run it. And I was like, okay, well, then I got to get out there. And I just got out, hit the pavement, and wrote every single magazine, newspaper, and then handling that. Like, in the beginning, everybody rejected this story, and I cobbled together all the money I had to get myself there. And then along the way, it's been, this is funny because everybody thinks that I get this like red carpet laid out and I get access and assignments. I am like, I have never gotten an assignment, from National Geographic. I am pitching every single time. And usually they reject me the first time, and then I have to go back and research and talk about how it's going to be different and unique. And I think people need to know that, like, it is serious work and commitment to first get access, then to get the images, and then you have even more work at the end. Like, my work is not done. And that, back into that, like, it's so important. We started this conversation about documenting your work too, like making sure you get names of everybody, get their phone numbers, get a way to reach out to them. So later on, if you need to, ask permission to use the images for something, or, just know all the details and document it, put it in the images, and make sure, in today's world of AI, where they're scraping the internet, using our images to train their models, like, I don't want that. I mean, it is expensive to do these stories, and our work is valuable. So know the value of your work. Protect yourself. There are tools out there to allow you to protect yourself. And it's so, there's like, people think photography is like, there's so much more than just pressing the button. Like, you got to learn all these things. And part of being a good business person is protecting your work.
Mm-hmm. God, this is so cool. You're the coolest.
No, you're the coolest.
This is so fun. I appreciate you sharing. I know it's like, it's so hard to, I mean, your career is, it's just, you've done so much. And so it's like being able to pinpoint, but I think like being able to share that story and the time that it takes, the commitment that it takes, like the grueling process of it behind the scenes, which I think is what's important when it comes to sharing the story publicly, helps amplify the image. You know what I mean? Because I think some people could just be scrolling on and see an image of, oh, that's sad, and they're not even reading a caption that says, this is the last one. And so I think that that's what's powerful about you. And it's funny to know that you feel that way, that you need to decompress afterwards, because every time anything I've watched from you so far, I'm like, God, she's so good at speaking. I don't know if I'll be able to talk to her, because I just say random shit all the time.
No, you're amazing. I mean, really. And, why you're so good at your work is you're like genuine. I mean, this is like let me just turn this around. I see so much in you, and I'm just curious, what do you think makes you a good storyteller?
Damn. I believe that I feel very similar to you. I feel like I'm just genuinely, my buddy and I will get in an Uber every time, and he likes to put headphones on and just cash out for the hour to LAX or something. And I'm like, hey man, what's going on? Like, tell me how long you been driving for? And I just am like always so curious about what other people have been doing. And I think that I love that. And I think I love my curiosity. I think the curiosity has educated me on all these walks of lives. I always talk about it. I went to Catholic school till I was in 8th grade, and then transferred to a public school. And I remember like the first day of going to public school, I found out like what a Gothic person was. And so I saw this kid, he ended up becoming my friend later on, but like just walking down head to toe, the look. And I was like, what? You know what I mean? Because I've been wearing khakis and yellow polos, and that's all I've been wearing every day forever. And then I was like, what is that? And then I like started learning about this kid's beliefs and what his interests are. And then I built new communities. And I just think that that's what's always, I'm so happy that I was curious that way, that I had that curiosity bug. And it's just allowed me to understand a little bit more on how the world works and how people are, and sympathize with people, where I feel like it's not that common from where I'm from, because a lot of people just aren't exposed to anything. Like they're not exposed to some of the cultures and which I can't blame people, because it's just life is designed this way, that you kind of just stay and be where you are as you are. And so I don't like that. And so I want to know more. I just want to, yeah.
Oh, I love that. No, it's, I think I said it earlier, but it's just empathy, right? And like that. And to me, that is like the all creativity comes from genuine empathy.
Yeah.
And
it's
really, yeah.
I was going to say too, it's also making someone happy too. Like there's also having empathy, but then also like, I love how much I've been obsessed with picking up my camera, and how much I've been obsessed with figuring out how to dial in the way I communicate my ideas or thoughts. And like when I can shoot something with Beyonce and I can provide it to her and she's like, I love this. Like, I'm like, yeah, sick. I did my thing. Or I can show a friend something and they laugh or whatever. And I think like you being able to take that image and gifting it to people to understand or take away or use as proof of concept or whatever it is. That's like, that's a drug. It's an absolute drug that there's no prescription for it.
Oh, no, I get it. And actually, isn't it amazing when you show somebody an image and you're like, that's how I see you. Mm-hmm. You are beautiful. Mm. And like that reaction, people are like, I never saw myself that way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's how I see you.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Like that's such a gift. We have such it's such a beautiful gift we have to be able to do this, to be able to walk in the world. And, there's a book I'm reading and I love it. Like there's this part where he just says like, the four things in life are something like being happy when you see any living thing happy, staying grounded and connected, And I forgot like the third thing, but the last one was like understanding that all of life's suffering is your suffering too. And just like this idea that like people's happiness is your happiness, and they're, you know, like we're all, it's just that interconnectedness. And I think just photography has been this like most amazing tool to go through the world and kind of live those truths.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, so cool. God, yes. I appreciate, hey, thank you. I know your time is valuable, so thank you so much for giving me an hour. I love it.
Oh, yeah. No, you do.
I appreciate it. This was so cool. And I'll make sure that I'm going to put all kinds of resources in here, including your nonprofit, so people can find everything that you're doing. And dang, it's sick. It makes, I just want to do more. I want to do more. So
no, thank you. This has been amazing. I hope we meet in real life.
Yes, we will do that. We got to make sure that happens. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
All right. Oh, wait. I almost forgot the thing I always do. Because you have Instagram. So when people get to this point, if they listen this far, I tell you to pick a hashtag. It can be any hashtag you want. And then I'm going to tell them to go whatever your latest Instagram post. They're going to comment in there and they're just going to put it. And that way they're going to tag me too. And that way you and I know that they listened to the whole episode. So 10 years from now, someone might throw this hashtag in your Instagram if Instagram still exists.
Empathy is everything.
That's it. Makes too much sense. Cool. All right. Well, do it. Tag me, people, who's listening to this. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. You take care. Bye.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.